If someone told you that everything you thought you knew about preparedness in America was about to change dramatically, you'd probably think they were being dramatic. But here's the thing that most people don't realize. The policy shifts happening right now are creating opportunities that the preparedness community hasn't seen in over a decade. And if you're not paying attention, you're going to miss out on advantages that could make the difference between being truly prepared and just thinking you are. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Another person talking about politics and prepping. But this isn't about taking sides. This is about understanding the landscape that's emerging and how it affects your ability to protect yourself and your family. Because whether you love these changes or hate them, they're happening, and smart preppers adapt to reality instead of wishing it was different. Let me share something that surprised even me when I started researching this. The number of Americans who identify as preppers has grown by 43% since 2020. That's millions of new people entering our community. And these policy changes are going to accelerate that trend in ways that nobody's talking about yet. So let's dive into the 5 biggest ways that recent policy shifts are reshaping the preparedness landscape. And I promise you, number 4 is going to change how you think about community preparedness forever. First up, and this one's already happening in real time, we're seeing a massive shift in how the federal government approaches disaster response. For decades, FEMA has been the default answer to every major emergency. But there's a deliberate push happening right now to move more responsibility back to states and local communities. Now, some of you might be cheering this, while others are worried. But here's what this actually means for you as a prepper. Your state and local preparedness resources are about to get a lot more important. The federal safety net that people have relied on is becoming less reliable by design. This isn't necessarily good or bad, but it is reality. And reality means that communities that prepare together are going to have massive advantages over communities that assume help will come from Washington. I've been talking to emergency coordinators across the country, and they're all saying the same thing. The communities that are already building local resilience networks, sharing resources, and training together are going to thrive. The communities that aren't are going to struggle. It's that simple. But here's where it gets interesting. This shift is creating opportunities for prepared individuals to become community leaders in ways that weren't possible before. If you have skills, supplies, and knowledge, your neighbors are going to need you more than ever. And that brings us to something most preppers never consider. Your preparedness isn't just about your family anymore. It's about your position in a community that's going to depend on people like you. The second major change is happening in the energy sector, and this one has implications that go way beyond just lower gas prices. We're seeing a complete reversal of policies that were pushing America away from domestic energy production. New drilling, faster pipeline approvals, and a focus on energy independence that we haven't seen in years. Now you might be thinking, how does this affect my preparedness? Here's how. Energy independence isn't just a national security issue. It's a personal security issue. When your country produces its own energy, prices are more stable, supply chains are more reliable, and the economic disruptions that can trigger social unrest become less likely. But there's something else happening that most people are missing. This energy boom is creating opportunities for off-grid and backup power solutions that didn't exist before. Propane is becoming more abundant and cheaper. Generators are easier to fuel. And the infrastructure that supports alternative energy for prepared households is expanding rapidly. I talked to a guy in Tech SAS last month who's been running his homestead on a combination of solar, propane, and a small wind setup. He told me that his backup fuel costs have dropped by 30% in just the last 6 months. That's money he's putting back into other preparedness priorities. And he's not the only one seeing these benefits. The third shift is one that's been brewing for a while, but it's accelerating rapidly now. We're seeing a fundamental change in how Americans think about self-defense and personal protection. And this goes way beyond just gun ownership. For years, there's been a cultural divide about whether regular citizens should take responsibility for their own protection or rely on law enforcement and government services. That debate is settling in favor of personal responsibility in ways that are creating new opportunities for prepared individuals. Concealed carry laws are expanding. Training requirements are being streamlined in many states. And the social stigma around being prepared to defend yourself and your family is disappearing fast. Now, some of you live in areas where this has always been normal. But for millions of Americans, especially in urban areas, this represents a massive cultural shift. Here's what this means practically. The tools, training, and mindset that prepared people have always valued are becoming mainstream. Tactical gear that used to mark you as an extremist is now sold at major retailers. Firearms training that used to be limited to military and law enforcement is available at local ranges. And the community of people who think like you is growing rapidly. But here's the part that really matters. This cultural shift is creating opportunities to build networks with people who used to think preppers were paranoid. Your neighbors who never understood why you stored food and water are now asking questions about home security. Your coworkers who used to laugh at your bug-out bag are now wondering if they should have emergency supplies. This is your chance to be a teacher instead of an outsider. And teaching others doesn't just help them. It helps you build the community connections that could be crucial in a real emergency. Now here's number 4, and this one is going to challenge how most of you think about preparedness. We're seeing the emergence of what I call prepared communities, and they're nothing like the isolated compounds that people usually imagine when they think about survival groups. These are normal neighborhoods, small towns, and even urban districts where significant numbers of residents have decided to take preparedness seriously together. They're sharing resources, coordinating training, and building redundant systems that can support everyone when things go wrong. I visited one of these communities in North Carolina recently, and what I saw blew my mind. They have a neighborhood watch that also functions as a communications network, a community garden that doubles as a food security system, and a tool-sharing cooperative that means every household has access to equipment they could never afford individually. But here's the really interesting part. This isn't some off-the-grid intentional community. It's a regular suburban neighborhood where people still commute to normal jobs and live normal lives. They just happen to have decided that being prepared is a community value worth organizing around. The policy changes happening now are making these kinds of communities easier to form and maintain. Local governments are more supportive of community resilience initiatives. Regulatory barriers to things like rainwater collection and food production are being reduced. And the legal framework for community self-defense is becoming clearer. If you're serious about long-term preparedness, you need to start thinking about how to either find one of these communities or help create one where you live. Because individual preparedness has limits that community preparedness doesn't. The 5th and final major change is happening in the supply chain world, and it's creating opportunities that prepared people need to understand right now. We're seeing a deliberate effort to bring critical manufacturing back to American soil. Not just for military equipment, but for everything from medical supplies to basic household goods. This reshoring trend is being accelerated by tariff policies that make foreign manufacturing less attractive and domestic manufacturing more competitive. Now, the economic experts can debate whether this is good or bad for the economy overall. But for preppers, it represents a fundamental shift in how we think about supplies and self-sufficiency. When critical goods are manufactured domestically, supply chains are shorter and more resilient. When there's a crisis in Asia or Europe, it doesn't immediately affect your ability to get the things you need. And when there's economic or political pressure on international trade, domestic alternatives are available. But here's the opportunity that most people are missing. This reshoring trend is creating demand for skilled workers in manufacturing, logistics, and technical trades. These are exactly the kinds of skills that prepared individuals should be developing anyway. Welding, electronics, mechanical repair, and small-scale manufacturing aren't just useful for homestead projects. They're becoming valuable career skills in an economy that's prioritizing domestic production. I know a guy who's been doing small-scale metal fabrication as a hobby for years. making parts for his own projects and helping out neighbors. He just got offered a full-time position with a company that's setting up manufacturing operations after moving production back from overseas. His preparedness hobby became a career opportunity because he had skills that are suddenly in high demand. This is happening across multiple industries: food processing, pharmaceutical manufacturing, electronics assembly, and energy equipment production are all expanding domestically. And they need people who understand how things work at a fundamental level. People who can troubleshoot, adapt, and solve problems without needing to call corporate headquarters. Now you might be wondering what all of this means for you personally. Here's the bottom line. The preparedness landscape is changing faster than it has in decades. The cultural, political, and economic trends are all moving in directions that create opportunities for people who think ahead and take responsibility for their own security. But those opportunities won't last forever, and they won't be available to everyone. The people who recognize these trends early and position themselves accordingly are going to have advantages that late adopters won't get. If you're already prepared, this is your time to deepen your capabilities and expand your network. If you're just getting started, you're entering the preparedness community at a moment when resources are becoming more available and social acceptance is growing rapidly. But here's what you absolutely cannot do. You cannot assume that these favorable conditions will continue indefinitely. Political winds change, economic cycles reverse, and cultural attitudes shift. The smart move is to take advantage of current opportunities while building resilience that can survive future changes. So here's my challenge for you. Pick one area where these policy changes create an opportunity for your preparedness goals. Maybe it's joining a local training group that's expanding because of changing attitudes about self-defense. Maybe it's investing in energy independence while fuel costs are dropping. Maybe it's developing skills that are becoming valuable in a reshaping economy. Whatever you choose, take action on it this week. Not next month. Not when you have more time. This week. Because the people who succeed in preparedness are the people who act on information instead of just consuming it. And here's my question for you. Which of these 5 changes affects your preparedness priorities the most? Drop a comment and let me know, because I read every single one and your insights help me understand what topics to cover next. If this information was valuable to you, hit that subscribe button, because these kinds of shifts are happening constantly, and staying informed about them is part of being truly prepared. Plus, I've got some deep dive videos coming up that explore each of these trends in much more detail. Share this with someone who needs to understand how the preparedness landscape is changing. Because the more people in your community who think strategically about these issues, the stronger your entire network becomes. And in the world we're heading into, strong networks are going to make all the difference.